What's up guys, Ryan here from MudGunner, and today we are talking about direct impingement versus piston-driven rifles, and I'm specifically talking about 5.56 for the sake of this video, but it kind of relates to a variety of calibers. And I'm doing this video after one of your guys' comments. The question was, are direct impingement rifles inferior to piston-driven rifles? But there was a couple comments on there. Someone said, you know, there's pros and cons of both, and I agree. There are pros and cons of both. And I wouldn't necessarily say one's inferior to the other, but yeah, there are pros and cons, so let's get into it. I'm gonna explain it to you guys in the way that I explain it to beginners because I'm not like mechanically inclined to really break down every little bit of it, but I'm gonna also show you guys a video that kind of breaks them down. So direct impingement is basically where you fire your round is going through your barrel and there's gases following behind it. The gases go up into your gas block, into a tube, and that gas blows out of the tube, which cycles your bolt. So normally that tube goes into your bolt carrier group, at least in an AR-15, and it pushes it back. So your gases are being used to shoot into the back of your receiver to cycle your bolt. And then in a piston-driven rifle, the gas does the same thing through the barrel, so it follows the round. And once it reaches your gas block, there is a type of rod there, a piston rod, and it pushes that rod, and then that's basically where the gas ends, and that rod cycles your bolt carrier group. So I pulled these images from Google and I think it shows pretty well, but yeah, that is the main difference. And I know on AR-15s, I guess it's not a true direct impingement rifle. Again, I don't know like the whole science behind it, but I guess a true direct impingement rifle, the gas just blows your bolt back. There's not a gas key for it to like be blown into. The French Moss rifle would be an example of that. Those are chambered in like 7.5 French, or they even did them in 308. But for the sake of ARs and 5.56 rifles, a direct impingement rifle has your gas tube that blows into your standard AR-15 bolt carrier. So I would say one of the pros and cons right off the bat is in a direct impingement rifle, like these two ARs right here, this one's actually piston driven, your gas is blowing out into your receiver area. So, and gases are not clean. You'll notice if you shoot a lot, your chamber area, your bolt carrier group, everything gets pretty dirty because the gas is used to cycle the gun. So as long as you keep it cleaned and oiled, that's not a problem. And honestly, like you can go a good amount without cleaning it, but you do need oil on there. And the gas is hot, so I mean, depending on your oil, it can evaporate the oil faster. So in a direct impingement gun, I would say the cleaning schedule is a little bit more, or maybe significantly more depending. The cleaning schedule of a direct impingement gun, I would say, is more required than a piston-driven gun. And I would say you need to clean it more because you have all the carbon, lead, whatever, just the residue blowing into your operating system basically. So, I mean, the heart of the gun is all back here. That is your whole operating system. If it's too dirty, the gun will not cycle. So that would be a con of direct impingement, but it's also a proven design. I mean, the AR-15, the M16, the M4, they've been out for so long, it is a proven design. Now, I'm not saying that they're not always trying to replace it with something, but it is still a proven design, and I don't think anything can really change that about it. Even when it's finally, you know, replaced with something, it was still an iconic gun. Just like the 1911, right? It's not the most practical gun anymore, but it is a proven design. So in a piston-driven rifle, they run a lot cleaner, and I'm specifically talking unsuppressed right now. I'll talk about suppressed in a minute, but in a piston-driven rifle, they genuinely run cleaner. I would say AKs are still a little dirty, but their tolerances make them run forever, even when they're dirty. But on like a SCAR or a MCX, they generally run pretty clean because you don't have all that gas blowing out into your bolt carrier group and all that. Now you still have gases escaping from the barrel because when that brass gets ejected, there's still gas in there and it will get dirty, but they run clean for a very long time. And the main thing is just keep them oiled, but it also doesn't blow the hot gas, so the oil stays on there longer as well. So I would say that's one of the biggest pros and cons, right, is the cleanliness or the amount of abuse one can take versus the other. I think piston-driven shines in that realm of just being able to last a little bit longer between cleanings, but I also wouldn't tell you to, you know, go shoot 1,000 rounds without cleaning or just to neglect your gun. I think maintaining your weapon is important, especially if you want it to run. I'm not saying you can't neglect it, but I think you should maintain your gun. So I still can't say one is that much better over the other just off of that fact, because again, the direct impingement AR-15 or M4, it's been a proven design. Now where the piston-driven I think shines is you can get a little bit more creative with the gun. So the AR-15 specifically requires a buffer tube, a buffer and spring to function. I got one right here. So it requires this to function, so you need a tube to hang off the back of it in order to work reliably. So in some of these piston-driven guns, you can get around that because you can basically shorten how everything operates, I guess. Like the way they design like the MCX, you have the side folding stock, the gun can still function this way, And you have an AR style bolt carrier group, but it has a little bit less mass, and the spring system is all built in to your bolt carrier group. So it's a much smaller, I guess, operating system. I mean, it's similar size, but it's just shrunk down to where you don't necessarily need a buffer tube. You can still add one, but you don't need the buffer and spring in order for this to function. So I think that helps with storage. Same thing with the SCAR. The SCAR has a side folding stock, and it can't operate that way. And not that you would necessarily just be wanting to shoot it that way, but that is something. You can get piston-driven guns normally a little bit smaller because of how the gun operates. And a lot of companies put a lot of design in how their operating system works because, again, your gas goes into the gas block and pushes a rod is the easiest way to describe it. And the other pros of the piston-driven guns is they actually make them a little bit more modular. And MCX, the SCAR, there's a variety of guns that have like quick change barrel systems, and you can change the calibers a little bit easier than an AR-15 just based on how they're designed from the ground up. But again, AR-15 is kind of an old design. These are all more modern designs. So things are always innovating in them. And even like AR-15s nowadays, like direct impingement ones, they've updated them a lot, but just nothing has taken off as much as some of these piston-driven guns. So what is a piston-driven gun? Well, almost every like specialty 5.56 you hear of, like the MCX, the SCAR, an AK, the Tavor, the Bren, the ACR, the PSA Jackal. What else do I got here? I wrote stuff down. We got the AUG, HK 416 or MR 5.56. Those are all piston-driven guns. So almost any gun from another country that we bring in, like 5.56 rifles, most of them are all piston-driven. I can't really think of any that are direct impingement. I'm sure there's probably some out there. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog drinking water, sorry. But yeah, there's really not any direct impingement 5.56 guns that come into the country from other countries because the SCAR is originally Belgium, AKs are made around the world, but now they're US made. MCXs are an American made piston driven gun. The Tavor is Israeli. Galil's also Israeli and piston driven. The ACR was an American piston gun. The Jackal's an American piston gun. The Bren is Czech Republic, but those are piston. Yeah, there's very few. I have a Daewoo. I forget if the Daewoo is piston driven or not. It might be, I don't remember. Daewoo is Korean. It's basically like a Korean AR-15. But yeah, piston-driven guns, most of the specialty guns that come into the country from other countries are normally piston-driven. And I would say most of them are proven designs, like a lot of those guns are used in those countries' militaries. Like, you have the HK 416, you have the CZ Bren that replaced their VZ58. You have a variety of modern rifles that have replaced whatever their military was using or is their current military issue. So SCAR's an iconic gun. And then in the realm of piston-driven guns, you have short stroke and then you have long stroke. And I'll show you the little clip that I got from Google again. So in a short stroke piston system, the gases push the rod, but it doesn't have to travel as far back to cycle your action. So it's a very short movement for the whole piston rod in order to cycle your bolt. And then every operating system is slightly different, even in short stroke piston. Like the FN SCAR has a massive bolt carrier group and then just a tiny little rod that pushes that massive bolt carrier group. And then you have long stroke piston where the rod is basically moving with your bolt carrier group. So the most iconic one would be an AK. So I'm going to show you guys this. So in an AK here, and these are super easy to take apart, that's your recoil spring. But how this works is, again, it's piston driven. So the gas comes out here and it pushes your rod, but it's all one unit. So instead of a short movement like that much, it has to come all the way back in order to cycle and then rechamber another round. So it's a long movement, so that's why they call it the long stroke piston. I mean, unless there's any other reason. But yeah, in a short stroke gun like the SCAR, the MCX, this AR right here, there's a variety of guns, or most of them nowadays, are short stroke piston. So your rod and your whole operating system in the front end doesn't have to move as far as the long stroke piston of the AK. There are a few long stroke piston guns out there. So you have the AK, you have the Galil, which is kind of like an Israeli AK. You have the Tavor, so you figure Israel made the Galil, and then they made the Tavor. So those are both long stroke piston guns. They also have their Carmel, which is piston driven, but I haven't looked into if it's long stroke or short stroke. You also have the ARAD, which is not in the country yet, but that's kind of like their version of the HK 416. That's also piston driven. So Israel's making a lot of piston-driven guns. I don't know about the Carmel and the ARAD if they're short stroke or long stroke. I would assume they're short stroke, but I don't know. Other long stroke guns, one thing that I didn't know was a long stroke piston is the PSA Jackal, which the Jackal looks like the ACR, the SCAR, or the Bren, but the ACR, SCAR, and Bren are all short stroke piston. The Jackal is actually a long stroke piston system, and I didn't know that because I don't own one, I've never shot one. So that's kind of interesting. And then, yeah, that's all I can really think of. Everything else is short stroke. So again, as far as short stroke guns go, you have the SCAR, the ACR, the AUG, the MCX, the HK, and the Bren. And there are other piston-driven guns. Those are just the main ones. And then most AR-15s, if they're piston-driven, they're short stroke piston. I think the only one that I could think of off the top of my head would be the primary weapon systems. So PWS, I believe they are all long stroke piston, but I don't have one and I haven't shot one, so I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. I think they're long stroke piston because I've seen them being taken apart and it's like a rod. So your gas tube is like one solid rod and it comes out the whole back end, which is interesting, especially for an AR-15. Now, the pros of the AR-15 being piston, they run cleaner, but the cons of it would be they all are proprietary parts. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to like put this back together without looking. So the cons of a piston-driven AR-15 is, for the most part, it is all proprietary parts. If you break anything in your bolt carrier group, you have to go to that company to get parts. I'm sure there's some stuff that's probably universal, like firing pin, stuff like that. I could still be wrong on that though. But on your operating system, like the rod that cycles, if this is an LWRC here, if I break anything on this, I need to go to LWRC for parts. All of these, proprietary, the HK MR556, all proprietary. PWS, I believe it's all proprietary. So that is a con of the piston-driven system, is you have to go to that company for parts. And if it's like an old gun that gets discontinued, which a lot of these companies are pretty big, I don't think they will, but there are a few. Like I have a CZ805 Bren, that piston system is not compatible with the modern Bren 2. And this AR-15, this is a rifle length direct gas tube. I can go buy a modern gas tube and throw it in there, no problem. So that is kind of a con for piston-driven guns, is you have to buy that brand specific parts. So one of the other cons of a piston-driven gun is they're generally heavier than a direct impingement, which it's not necessarily a big deal. So, sorry. Just want to get that back together. It's not necessarily a big deal that they're heavier, but let's say you have a 16-inch direct impingement AR versus a 16-inch piston AR. They're piston-driven is going to be heavier, and LWRC makes a good example of that because they make both piston-driven and direct impingement. If you buy like a 16-inch, which this is an 18-inch, if you bought a 16-inch DI LWRC and then a 16-inch piston-driven LWRC, it's going to be noticeably heavier. Reliability-wise, they're both still reliable. Again, it's not saying that one is like not going to work, but just you can probably neglect the piston-driven gun a little bit more. Suppressing wise, piston guns normally come with suppressor settings. I'm not going to say they always do. Old school, like LWRCs, a lot of their piston guns did not have adjustments. This one does, but their 16-inch guns did not. Now their newer ones, I believe they are. So a lot of piston guns have adjustable pistons, which means you're reducing or adding more gas to the system. So you basically, on a lot of guns, you have normal setting, which is just general fire, and then you have an adverse setting, which dumps more gas into the system. So let's say your gun is dirty, like it's struggling to cycle. You can put it in an adverse setting or a higher gas setting, and it's gonna cycle it much easier. But now if you have it in that setting when it's perfectly clean, you're actually gonna be harsher on the parts because it's cycling it faster and harder. And then also, a lot of piston guns have suppressor settings where you can reduce the gas, because when you add a suppressor to your gun, it's making those gases travel faster. It's making everything, it's dumping back pressure, so it's going to push that rod harder. Or if it was a direct impingement gun, it's going to push that gas out the back much faster. So putting a suppressor on your gun normally makes the fire rate much faster, and you don't notice it semi-auto, but in a full auto gun, it's going to make it noticeably faster. And there's pros and cons of that too, obviously, but the con is you're wearing out your parts faster, you're heating it up faster. So having a gun with an adjustable piston or even like direct impingement, there are some upgrades you can do to reduce the gas pressure. But yeah, reducing gas pressure when you're running the gun suppressed is a nice thing to be able to do, because it'll make your parts last longer. And if you're not suppressing it, it's probably not a big worry. But that is just one thing. Suppressors are very mainstream now, so companies are adding suppressor settings to their piston-driven guns. Direct impingement wise, there's not too much. I mean, there are some things that you can do. So Geisley is a pretty good company for making different springs and buffer weights. And you'll hear a variety of stuff. There's like H1, H2, H3, there's even other ones. But generally speaking, if you're running your gun suppressed, running it with an H2 buffer is gonna slow down how fast it's cycling. And I would say there's even like, it's kind of like tuning your gun, because depending on the barrel length of your gun, that also determines what buffer and spring you wanna use, because all guns have different gas tube lengths. They're gonna have just different cycling rates overall. And then in a direct impingement gun, you have normally 4 different lengths of your gas tube, which again is what cycles your gun. You have pistol length, which is normally for like 300 blackout setups, or very short, like less than 10-inch barrel length. You generally have a pistol gas tube for that, so the shortest gas tube. And then in your standard 16-inch, and even in like, 12-inch up to 16-inch, they're normally carbine length. So this is a traditional carbine length. Your gas tube is about this long. And then the next one up of that would be mid-length. And then after mid-length, it goes to rifle length, which is the general gas tube on a 20-inch gun. I don't think there's anything longer than rifle length. I could be wrong, but yeah, so rifle length is the longest gas tube. Pistol length is the shortest, but generally speaking, carbine length is the shortest you'll see in a standard rifle. Mid-length is a good in between. And even that, the longer the gas tube, the more time it has to travel. So it'll even affect how soft the gun shoots. Like this gun's gonna shoot a little bit softer than that gun. And it's not even that it's like heavier, because it weighs probably lighter than this, especially with the setup. It's just the gas has a lot longer time to travel. And then the way the spring and the buffer all work, 20-inch guns shoot extremely soft because your gas is not as harsh on the system. So yeah, it kind of goes like, I know I'm going in a lot of directions, but that's really what it comes down to. It's kind of like tuning your gun like you would tune a car. So you can do that by either changing the buffer and spring. You can have an adjustable gas block. Like this is your gas block right here. It's your front sight post. Not adjustable. You can't do anything to it. But there are even companies that make a gas block where you can adjust like a screw in the front or on the side, and it'll reduce or increase the amount of gas you're getting into the system. So there are a lot of modern ways to adjust how much gas is going into your gun, but then it really comes down to fine-tuning the gun. So there are pros and cons of all those systems, and this is where it comes into, do you build a gun or do you buy a built gun? So bought versus built. I generally like built guns because it's kind of like, again, building a car. If you build it from the ground up, it's on you to make sure it works, and not everything is compatible with each other. Even if it's meant for an AR-15, doesn't necessarily mean your exact setup would work if you built it from the ground up. Where if I buy an LWRC or just any other gun from the factory, generally speaking, it's going to work out of the box. And then even suppressing this, like it works fine. Like you are going to wear parts out a little bit faster, but it's not like you're just going to kill it in a couple range trips. They can still take a lot of abuse before it becomes an issue. But this topic can be spread through a whole series of videos. I'm just trying to make it in like a sub 20-minute video for you guys. But yeah, as far as piston versus DI being more practical than the other, it's up to you, because you can make a direct impingement gun very reliable, running suppressed, running without a suppressor. Like it is a reliable system. And then same thing with piston driven. Like it's good whether you're running suppressed or unsuppressed. There's just pros and cons of it. So hopefully this kind of like explains at least the differences between them. It may not say which one's better or worse than the other, because it's really hard to say which one is better or worse. I like both a lot for different reasons. Now I like all the piston driven guns that come into the country, but like if there was a direct impingement SCAR, I think that'd be cool. But like I don't know how it would function then, just generally speaking, all the guns that come in from other countries are piston driven, and then the most iconic American AR would be direct impingement. So yeah, they're both great in their own ways. If you want the most practical, I have to say a direct impingement AR is going to be the most practical, because it's the most widely used, the most universal parts. Like you can buy a bolt carrier group from basically any company and it's going to work in your gun. Where again, a piston driven gun, you can only go with that one company's bolt carrier group unless someone makes an aftermarket bolt carrier group specific to that brand. So you're limited on your parts availability for piston driven, but direct impingement, at least here in the United States, it's the most practical setup. So if we're going practical, I'd say direct impingement. If we're going, you want, your dream, like end of the world rifle, piston driven gun, again, will last longer, but if one part breaks, you're screwed unless you have extras from that specific company. So just, again, I like them both. I recommend them both. I just wanted to give you guys some details of the pros and cons of each one. So hopefully I gave you guys a little bit more information than you had, but yeah, thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for my next video.